Oh, say hello to Alex Wilkes. She is a senior vice president at Rising PAC. And welcome, Alex. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm great.
Good. I'm looking forward to having this conversation because it seems we're in a never-ending, nonstop cycle of campaigning at this point, isn't it?
It never ends.
It never ends. And we here in Connecticut are going to be experiencing it ourselves because we have a new administration coming in, and this administration is pulling some people to work for him out of the Senate and the House, and so that's going to start some more races, and then after those races are decided, then we're going to have some more races to fill those, and it's like it never ends.
And I think that's just sort of a symptom of the modern campaign and technology. There's always an opportunity to be showcasing oneself, and we know how much Washington loves their egos. So I think that whether it's a book tour or it's a trip to Iowa, these Democratic candidates, really any candidate for Washington, they can't help themselves.
Well, and it's funny because a lot of these candidates, and we're going to be going through the slate of Democrats who've already either made their intentions known or have sort of danced around it a little bit. Also, many other people have talked about potentially some of these people being candidates for governor. And the interesting thing about it is these were people who were mentioned even in the last cycle for the 2016 race, and then they sort of fell to the side after Hillary Clinton kind of came in and took over the whole storyline, and only one person was able to stand up strong, and that was Bernie Sanders, who fought her nearly all the way to the end. But, wow, I find it fascinating. There's so many people that are being discussed here on the Democratic side. Who do you think is probably the front runner at this point?
Well, if you pay attention to the polls, which I'm not sure how instructive they are at this point, but Joe Biden seems to be topping those polls. But as you mentioned, in 2016, Hillary Clinton was pretty masterful at cornering all of the donors, basically the Democratic universe, and getting them to her side before Joe really had a fighting chance. So he was edged out of the race pretty early. But if you kind of look at where the Democratic Party is right now, it's really not the party that it was in 2016 or really when Joe Biden was sort of at his peak. This is a party now that's moving increasingly to the left. And, Joe Biden, is a guy who voted for NAFTA. He voted for the crime bill in the 90s. And that's not so resonant with where the new, progressives are. So I think that, it'll sort of be a wonder for the history books if 2016 wasn't the year that Joe Biden sort of missed his chance.
There's a website called Predictit or predictit.org that you can bet on these campaigns. You can bet on candidates and see who's going to be. And interestingly enough, at the very top of the list, the number one person who has the highest potential right now is Beto O'Rourke.
Beto is someone that is definitely someone to watch. He was able to marshal an incredible amount of enthusiasm and small dollar support in his failed Senate Texas run in 2018. And he almost has some of those Obama-like qualities, right? He's youthful, he's charming, he's hopeful.
He rides skateboards.
Yeah, he's someone that might not fit quite in with where the Democrats want to go. He has a lot of family money, for example. He's, been a little cozy with the oil industry down there. He, believe it or not, there are many marks that could be against you in the Democratic primary these days. And Beto O'Rourke is someone who, doesn't have that perfect ideological fit. It's also something to consider, too. Someone like David Axelrod was speaking recently in an interview and asked about Beto O'Rourke, and he sort of said sharply that the party tends not to nominate losers. The claws are out. It seems to be, but it's not an invalid point that he did lose his race for Senate, albeit it was in Texas. But he, some baggage came out in the race, like, for example, his arrest for DWI. So, this is not a perfect candidate by any means, although he certainly has energy.
Now, you mentioned Joe Biden earlier, and I look at this Predictit site as kind of something that not really all that predictive, because you'll find many, as in my opinion anyway, a lot of the old school Democrats, a lot of people who don't want to play this game, just your mainstream kind of Democrats are not going to be going on this site and sort of betting on candidates. But you might find the younger, more active, more energized, the Alexandria Cortez type people out there who are going to be playing on this kind of website and playing with this technology. So I don't think this is really predictive of where the Democrat Party is. However, I see, and as you've mentioned, there's this kind of uprising of the far left progressive wing of the Democrat Party that is trying to push back and fight against the Joe Bidens and the Hillary Clintons. To be fair, she's a little bit more mainstream compared to these people. And many of these other candidates, what do you think that, because the top five in this list are Beto O'Rourke, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. Out of those five, Joe Biden is really the most mainstream of the candidates. The other four are considered to be very, very progressive.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't doubt that a site like Predicted would attract some of those younger participants that might sort of boost some of those names up. But, as I mentioned before, the race for who will be the Democratic Party nominee seems to really be about who can race, so far to the left so as to be appealing to that same base that Bernie Sanders was able to energize in the 2016 elections, and that Hillary Clinton, quite frankly, was never able to they were never able to warm up to Hillary Clinton. And so, I think that if you read the reports from Iowa and New Hampshire at this stage, there is a lot of interest in people like Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, sort of the younger crowd. But, some of their, again, the purity test is so stringent at this point that any move in the wrong direction is immediately it immediately lights up all of the Democratic blogs and the news sites that are covering this in sort of a negative way. Like, for example, the fact that Kirsten Gillibrand and Cory Booker are reaching out to Wall Street. That was sort of an immediate red flag that got thrown around this week. There is really just, it's so sensitive. There are so many tripwires at this point in the game that, you do wonder at some point who can sort of make a name for themselves apart from just happening to take the leftmost position.
I was reminded of the early year or two of the 2016 campaign when the Republicans had, I think, 17 different candidates running for president, to the point where they had to break the debates up into two separate tiers and all kinds of things were going on. And there were many people on the Democrat side and many progressive pundits who were saying that it shows a problem in the Republican Party that there are so many people running. And I thought, no, it shows that there's a lot of people who think that the whatever the Democrat candidate is beatable, and they want to be the person there to do it. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that having so many people being bandied about and potentially running on a single ticket for the nomination is evidence of a fracture within the party?
So I would argue that the difference between the Republican field in 2016 versus the Democratic field now is that the Republican field tended to sport some more diversity on ideological lines. I mean, you had everyone in there from Rand Paul to a hawk like Lindsey Graham. There were, unconventional candidates like Donald Trump, Carly Fiorina, for example. There were sort of people of all sorts of different ideological stripes, whereas the Democratic field, as I mentioned, if you look at their core issues, they're pretty much, in sync. And, I think that the biggest split in the Democratic Party right now is old guard versus new guard. And, just how much of that old guard, how much, sort of support can that old guard corner, and how much, how rebellious can that new guard be is really, I think, going to be the test for them. A good example of this is that Joe Biden was just endorsed by Senator Dianne Feinstein from California. Well, presumably, Senator Feinstein should have endorsed her younger colleague Kamala Harris, of course, another senator from California, the other senator from California. but she chose not to. And, I would love to have been a fly on the wall during that decision-making process and seeing what that was like because, Dianne Feinstein was someone who faced a pretty serious primary challenge from the left this time around in California and was supported by Kamala Harris. So Kamala sort of took a risk out in supporting her only to have Dianne Feinstein support Joe Biden in the end. So I think that really with the Democratic Party, it doesn't show diversity along ideological lines. It's really more about the old guard versus the new guard.
And part of the fun here is going to be, and we saw this again, I'm going to go back to the Republican 2016 slate. Part of the fun is going to be watching all of the pieces move because we saw in the 2016 race, you had someone maybe did a decent performance in a debate and they shot to the top. And then the next day they were the focus of every single pundit, every single news channel. And then they slowly fell off the list. And then you had someone else shoot to the top and then they slowly fell back and then eventually dropped out. And it was really interesting to watch who was like the flavor of the week every single week with the politicians. And I see the same thing happening here with all of these candidates. And again, right now it's really early. So the fact that somebody like Beto O'Rourke or Kamala Harris are near the top is not surprising because they are the more photogenic. They are the more, they're getting the heat. They're getting the press attention. But as this all plays out, and like you said, as we see some of these more mainstream moderate Democrats start throwing their endorsements behind someone who they strategically think has a chance as opposed to someone that they maybe more would like to see win, that's going to be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real roller coaster in 2016, as you've pointed out. You never knew what new moment would cause a candidate to sort of rocket to the top or pique interest among the Republican primary electorate. And of course, this is over. There was an overlay of strategic, sort of role playing and gamesmanship when it came to the delegate process for the primary. So, the Democrats have a slightly different system. They, voted recently to limit the power of superdelegates, although some progressives felt like that didn't go far enough. So it will certainly be interesting to see the map that they sort of draw for them, that these different candidates draw for themselves to see, where they think they might be able to garner the most support. And I think that another interesting sort of, marker at this point, even though it's a little too early to see the kind of jockeying that we saw at the later stages of the 2016 primary campaign, is to see the staffing race. And to see who can secure those all-important staffers on the ground in places like Iowa. For example, Beto O'Rourke was able to steal two staffers who had previously been loyal to Joe Biden in South Carolina, whereas, Elizabeth Warren was able to snatch the Obama digital guys. So there's definitely some jockeying going on there that's pretty interesting right now.
As we go down this list, and again, I hate to keep referring to this predicted site, but it's really one of the, as far as I can tell, one of the best that kind of list all of the names that have been talked about. It's funny because they've got Oprah Winfrey on this list. They've got Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on this list. And again, I only laugh about that because it's kind of where Trump came into this. He was the what's the word I'm looking for? He was the outlier early on. He was the guy who was drawing all the media heat because he was a celebrity. And so now everybody's talking about Oprah Winfrey. She's actually polling ahead of people like Andrew Cuomo, Jerry Brown, and even Hillary Clinton, which I think is fascinating.
Well, that's not so surprising to me. Oprah Winfrey is a eminently more likable character than Andrew Cuomo or Hillary Clinton. Sort of beloved by a lot of Americans. And look, I mean, anything is possible because back in 2015, if you had told me around this time that Donald Trump was going to come in and dominate the Republican field, that would have been a completely foreign, idea. And so it is possible that there could be some celebrity-like figure, like a Mark Cuban or some other figure that just comes in and enchants the Democratic field, and it makes it difficult for any of these other candidates to get oxygen. I think that was sort of one of the hallmarks of the 2016 primary campaign, is that the media started focusing so heavily on Donald Trump that it was difficult for any of these other candidates to get traction because they just simply couldn't get the airtime. And so, after 2016 and the experience there, I would never say never when it comes to, a surprise, dark horse candidate that could come in and really shake things up.
Well, and again, I think a really interesting part of the 2016 campaign was that there were so many people that votes were being split in 17 different ways. So you only needed to get a couple of votes to basically win a state or maybe pull a couple of delegates. And Trump had the staying power there. Trump was able to kind of sort of float around the middle for a while. He had a lot of people that didn't like him, but a lot of people that did. And, you had some of the lesser candidates eventually falling out, and he just sort of stayed along with it until eventually. And I think most people were really surprised by the fact that, wait, he's still standing? I know I was. He's still standing? How is he still standing?
Yeah, it was a wild time, certainly. And, I think that the primary caught everyone a little bit by surprise, and that's why I would not be shocked if there was some similar, character who would come in on the Democratic side. And, boy, wouldn't that be a sight to see? It's like some other larger-than-life celebrity character going head-to-head with President Trump. That would certainly be a TV spectacle for the ages.
Well, I don't think of all of the people that we're talking about here, I don't think we've seen the end of people who might potentially toss their hat into the ring or at least make some waves or get some attention on it. There's been a lot of businessmen. There's a lot of former CEOs of large tech companies who have said that they'd be interested in maybe potentially investigating this. You've got people like former Mayor Bloomberg out of New York who's talked about it. So I think it is really early, but it's really kind of interesting to get a look at who the names are, at least of the early group of potential candidates. I think in 6 months, a year, it's going to be completely upended. I think we're going to have a completely different group of people. I mean, still some of the same old names in there, but I still think it's going to be fascinating to watch how this whole thing plays out.
I agree. There are so many different names at this point that it would be difficult to say. And things move so quickly these days with the media and online that it would just be difficult to say that any of these people right now who are sort of staking their claims and trying to get their feet wet in this race, that anything will be the same a year from now.
Or even 3 months. I mean, the bright, shiny penny of the day might go very dull very quick.
Yes, absolutely.
Alex Wilkes, she's the Senior Vice President at America Rising. Where can people learn more about your organization, Alex?
They can check out americarisingpac.org.
Pleasure talking to you today. Really enjoyed the conversation. Look forward to having you back as we continue to handicap the 2020 race.
Thank you so much. Anytime.
Take care. Have a great day.